Welcome, brave souls, to Stories by Banick. As the October wind howls outside and the moon casts eerie shadows, there's no better time to dive into the chilling realm of the unknown. Today, we bring you 5 apparently true tales that circle the mysterious aura of Halloween. Each story whispers of real encounters and spine-chilling experiences from those who claim to have lived them. So, dim the lights, snuggle up with your favorite blanket, and let the atmosphere of All Hallows Eve envelop you. Prepare yourself, for the line between reality and nightmare is about to blur. Let's begin. Halloween in our small town of Edgewater has always been a grand spectacle. Streets are lined with carved pumpkins, houses are adorned with cobwebs and skeletons, and children, dressed in their spooky best, fill the air with laughter and excitement. As the years went by and I transitioned from a trick-or-treater to an adult, I found my own ways to enjoy the festivities. Hosting a Halloween party became my tradition. In 2017, I decided to throw a bigger party than usual. I sent out invites to close friends, acquaintances, and some colleagues. By nightfall, my house was filled with the sounds of chatter, laughter, and Halloween-themed music. With the ambient lighting and carefully curated playlist, the atmosphere was electric. As the night wore on and the punch bowl emptied, the crowd started to thin. Some left in pairs, some in groups, and some, a little more intoxicated, called cabs. As I began cleaning up, a friend pointed out a figure standing across the street, obscured in the dim glow of a solitary streetlight. The figure was distant and donned a hauntingly detailed mask. At first glance, it seemed like someone simply admiring the party, or perhaps mustering the courage to ring the doorbell. But as the minutes turned into hours, he remained there, still, silent, watching. Growing uneasy, I decided to step outside to confront the mysterious onlooker. But as I approached, he retreated further into the shadows of a nearby alley, disappearing from sight. I ventured a bit to see if I could spot him, but found no trace. Returning to my home, I locked the doors and tried to shake off the unnerving encounter. Perhaps it was just a prank or an overzealous partygoer, I thought. But then, just past midnight, my phone buzzed to life with a notification. An unknown number. The message read, "I see you." A cold shiver ran down my spine. The rational side of me considered it might be a prank by one of the partygoers, but deep down, an unsettling feeling took root. Not wanting to take any chances, I dialed the police. They arrived within minutes, combing the vicinity. Though they found no sign of the mysterious figure, they did discover a small, crumpled note at my doorstep. In rushed, almost frantic handwriting, it read, "See you next Halloween." The police took the note for fingerprints, but came up empty. They suggested I install security cameras and assured me they'd keep a closer eye on my neighborhood, especially as the next Halloween approached. Months passed, and life returned to normal. But as October rolled around again, a sense of unease settled in. I decided against hosting a party that year, opting instead for a quiet night in. I had installed security cameras as the police had advised and kept my home well lit. Yet as midnight approached, there was a knock at my door. Pulling up the feed from the security camera, my heart stopped. There, standing on my doorstep, was the same masked figure. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, he was gone, leaving behind only another note, which chillingly read, "I'll be back." Each Halloween since, I've seen no sign of the mysterious stalker, but the fear lingers. Every knock, every unexpected message sends my heart racing, always wondering if he'll return to fulfill his cryptic promise. Hey everyone, long-time lurker, first-time poster here. I had an experience last Halloween that's been eating away at me, and I just had to share it. I know this sub is used to some really intense and crazy stories, but mine is a bit more subtle. Anyway, here goes. I live in a pretty average suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows each other. And the worst thing you have to worry about is Mr. Thompson's cat getting into your garbage. Houses are relatively close, and there's a real sense of community. I've lived here for about 4 years now, in a quaint 2-story home with large bay windows, and honestly, it's been peaceful. Except for last Halloween night. It started like any other Halloween night. Kids in costumes going door to door, the scent of pumpkin spice in the air, and everyone in high spirits. With the pandemic mostly behind us, this year felt more lively, a throwback to the normal Halloweens. By 9 p.m., the trick-or-treaters began dwindling, and by 10 they were all but gone. I decided to spend my night watching classic horror movies and indulging in the leftover candy. As the night progressed, the wind picked up outside, creating an eerie ambiance with tree branches scratching against my windows. Typical Halloween night vibes. About halfway through Psycho, a favorite of mine, I noticed something odd. At the edge of my peripheral vision, just beyond the glow of the TV, there seemed to be a shadow. Not the usual kind, like from a lamp or furniture. This was distinct, humanoid, and seemed to stand upright in the corner of my living room. I turned to look directly at it, but it was gone. Just an empty corner. I chalked it up to the movie playing tricks on my mind and tried to forget about it. Every so often, I'd catch that same shadow, always at the edge of my vision. It didn't matter where I was in the house, my bedroom, the kitchen, even the bathroom. It was always just out of direct sight. Every time I tried to confront it head-on, it'd disappear. Growing increasingly paranoid, I checked all my doors and windows, ensuring they were locked. Maybe someone was playing a prank on me. But everything was secured. I decided to set up my phone in the living room, recording the corner where I first saw the shadow. I left it recording overnight, hoping to catch something that would help me make sense of this. In the morning, after a restless night of sleep, I reviewed the footage. Hours of nothing until around 3:33 a.m. There it was. The shadow figure, standing still, almost looking. Aware. It lingered for what felt like hours, but was actually mere minutes, then just faded away. I tried to show the footage to some neighbors and friends. Their reactions varied from thinking it was a camera glitch to genuinely being concerned. A couple of them did say they had felt weird vibes from my house before, but never saw anything concrete. Mr. Thompson, yes, the one with the mischievous cat, suggested it might be related to the previous homeowner. Apparently, the elderly man was somewhat of a recluse and had an interest in the occult. Maybe he tried some ritual and left behind something. So here I am, a year later, and Halloween is just around the corner again. The shadow hasn't made another appearance since that night, but I can't shake the feeling that it's still here, watching, waiting. Has anyone else experienced something similar? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Edit. Thanks for all the supportive messages. To those asking for the video, I'm trying to upload it, but for some reason it won't process. We'll keep trying. Barlow had always been one of those towns where stories lingered. Nestled between sprawling hills and dense woodlands, it had a reputation for being steeped in legends and folklore. Each tale, however, was centered around Barlow Forest, a sprawling expanse of trees that seemed to consume the land around it. I grew up hearing stories about the forest from my grandparents. They'd speak of sounds they couldn't place, footprints too large to belong to any known animal, and shadows lurking just beyond the periphery of vision. But as I aged, these tales became mere childhood memories, stories to tell around a campfire. That is until one fateful Halloween when my skepticism was seriously challenged. Having taken up nature photography, I found the idea of capturing Barlow Forest in the eerie light of All Hallows' Eve irresistible. I thought it would offer a blend of natural beauty and the uncanny, given the date. So I packed up my gear and decided on an overnight trip, aiming to both experience the forest at night and capture the first light of dawn. As I trekked deeper into the woods, I set up camp near a small clearing. The sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. As darkness draped over, the forest seemed to come alive. The gentle whispering of the trees and the occasional distant call of an animal felt both calming and slightly unsettling. Hours passed as I played with my camera settings, trying to capture the forest bathed in moonlight. It was during one of these moments of focus that I heard it. A rustling sound, distant at first, but unmistakably drawing closer. Then a low growl echoed, so primal that it sent a shiver down my spine. I grabbed my flashlight, scanning the trees. To my surprise, a set of eyes reflected back, not from the ground level as I'd expect of a deer or a fox, but higher up, almost at the height of a tall man. A silhouette moved just beyond the reach of the light, heavy footfalls suggesting something substantial. Holding my breath, I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a bear. But the deliberate two-legged gait was hard to explain away. It moved closer, its form obscured by the shadows. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it retreated into the dark, leaving only the sounds of rustling leaves. Sleep was out of the question. As dawn approached, I packed up hastily, the first light revealing large, unidentifiable tracks near my campsite. They were like nothing I'd ever seen, a mix of a deer's hooves and a human's footprints. Returning to town, I shared my experience at a local diner. To my surprise, many nodded, their faces a mix of concern and familiarity. An older gentleman, Mr. Caldwell, approached me. He spoke of similar encounters from his youth, of a creature in the woods that was spoken of in hushed tones, never fully seen and never identified. "You might have just seen the elusive spirit of Barlow Forest," he said with a wink. "Or maybe it was just a curious animal, given the day. Halloween does have a way of playing tricks on the mind." I left Barlow with more questions than answers. While I may never truly know what lurked in the forest that night, the experience has left me with a newfound respect for the tales of old and the mysteries our world still holds. Autumn in Fairhaven has a charm of its own. The town is painted in hues of orange and yellow, and the crisp air carries the anticipation of Halloween. But for me, that particular Halloween night was more than just a celebration. It became a haunting memory that I would carry for a lifetime. Having grown up in Fairhaven, I'd come to love everything about Halloween: the parades, the carnivals, and the spontaneous haunted houses set up by enthusiastic neighbors. That year, after enjoying the annual Halloween fair at the town's Central Park, I decided to walk home, taking in the sights and sounds of the festivities. The town park, a sprawling green space dotted with oaks and maples, had a winding pathway that served as a shortcut to my home. The path, while scenic during the day, took on an eerie aura at night. The trees, with their gnarled branches, cast strange, twisted shadows under the moonlight. Most locals avoided it at night, especially on Halloween, when rumors of ghosts and ghouls were rife. But time and familiarity had diminished any fear I once held for that path. As I strolled along, I noticed a peculiar figure a few yards ahead. He was tall, wearing an old-fashioned suit that seemed out of place even for Halloween. His face was hidden behind a grotesque, elongated mask that seemed to gleam under the faint light. Initially, I dismissed him as just another Halloween enthusiast, perhaps headed to a themed party. But then, I saw her. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, with headphones in, lost in her music, oblivious to the world. The masked man's trajectory changed subtly, aligning with hers. His steps were measured, deliberate. A growing sense of unease formed in the pit of my stomach. Every instinct told me to intervene, to warn her, but fear rooted me to the spot. Then, as they approached a particularly dark stretch, shadowed by a dense grove of trees, he began to close the distance between them alarmingly fast. Without thinking, I picked up a fallen branch and yelled, breaking the stillness of the night. The woman, jolted from her reverie, looked back in alarm, catching sight of the masked figure just a few feet behind her. Without a second thought, she sprinted in the opposite direction. The masked man, momentarily taken aback, turned his gaze to me. For a brief, chilling moment, our eyes locked. Even through the mask, I could feel the intensity of his stare. And then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he melted into the shadows. The police were informed, and a manhunt began. A few days later, I learned from the local news about the capture of an escaped convict, known for a series of heinous crimes, who wore a signature mask to hide his identity. I often think about that night, about the turn of events that could have led to a horrifying outcome. Every Halloween, as the town comes alive with festivities, I'm reminded of the thin line that separates revelry from terror, and how close I came to confronting the darkest facets of human nature. Pine Street, located at the heart of Smithfield, has a peculiar reputation among locals. Most of the houses are well maintained, occupied by generations of families that have lived in harmony for decades. But there's one exception, number 47. Its dark, weathered facade and overgrown lawn have always made it stand out. But on Halloween night, its presence was even more pronounced. It was 2005, and I was fresh out of college, eager to embark on a new journey as a writer. Always on the hunt for a compelling story, I'd heard whispers about the house on Pine Street, tales of a tragic past, of the family that lived and died there under mysterious circumstances, and of the shadows that still lingered. Halloween seemed like the perfect night to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a voice recorder, I approached the house. The wooden sign reading 47 inches creaked ominously in the wind. Pushing open the rusty gate, its screech cutting through the quiet of the night, I made my way to the entrance. The house was ostensibly empty, yet it felt alive. Every room seemed to whisper secrets from the past. In the dim light, old portraits gazed down with an intensity that was almost palpable. As I ventured further, I reached what appeared to be the living room. A grand, dusty chandelier hung overhead, and beneath it was a circle of chairs. Curiously, each chair held a framed photograph of a family member. Positioning my recorder, I began to speak, detailing my observations, hoping to capture any sounds or anomalies. And then it happened. A soft, melancholic tune began to play, like a lullaby from a distant past. Following the sound, I came upon a vintage gramophone, its needle moving rhythmically, though there was no record in sight. Startled, I considered fleeing, but my curiosity got the better of me. I continued exploring, eventually finding a study filled with old letters and journals. Skimming through one, I pieced together the story of the Henderson family, the once proud occupants of the house. The journal spoke of love, loss, and betrayal. It detailed how Mr. Henderson, suspected of infidelity by his wife, was caught in a web of jealousy and paranoia. The situation escalated one fateful night, leading to a tragic end for the family. Engrossed in my reading, I barely noticed the temperature drop. A chill ran through the air, making the flames of the few candles I'd lit flicker wildly. And then, a silhouette, a faint shadow of a woman, possibly Mrs. Henderson, emerged, moving towards the circle of chairs. Heart racing, I decided it was time to leave, but not before grabbing the journal as evidence of my findings. As I made my way out, I could have sworn I heard a soft whisper pleadingly saying, "Don't go." Emerging into the safety of the street, I looked back. The house, bathed in moonlight, stood silent, its many secrets now partly known to me. Over the next few weeks, I documented my experience and the tragic tale of the Hendersons. The article, when published, was met with a mix of intrigue and skepticism. Some locals thanked me for shedding light on the haunted history of Pine Street, while others dismissed it as mere folklore. But every year, as Halloween approaches and the winds carry tales of ghostly encounters, the legend of Number 47 continues to grow, solidifying its place as one of the most enigmatic landmarks of Smithfield. And I, having been a part of its tale, often find myself wandering back, drawn to its magnetic allure, forever captivated by the shadowed house on Pine Street. Hey folks, I've been a regular on this sub for a while now, mostly reading and not sharing. But with Halloween around the corner, I thought it would be the perfect time to share something that happened to me a few years ago that still gives me the chills. Bit of background. I live in a medium-sized town, friendly neighbors, community events, and generally the kind of place where people don't lock their doors. Though after my story, you'll see why I do now. Every Halloween, our street holds a block party full of games, BBQs, and of course, trick-or-treating. For the past few years, I've set up a candy swap station in my driveway. The idea is that kids can swap out candy they don't like for something they do. It's always a hit, and I've gotten to know many of the neighborhood kids this way. On this particular Halloween, the evening was going as expected. Laughter echoed through the streets, jack-o'-lanterns flickered, and my candy swap station was swarmed. As the evening wore on and the younger kids retreated home, the older ones, mostly teens, began their rounds. Most were familiar faces, jokingly trying to swap pencils for king-sized candy bars, the usual banter. However, around 9 p.m., a boy around 15 or 16 approached. He wore an old-fashioned jester costume, colorful, but with muted, dirty-looking tones. The bells on his hat jingled softly with each step. His face was obscured by a faded, wrinkled mask, making him appear both ancient and childish at the same time. It was eerie, to say the least. He silently handed over a piece of candy for a swap, a generic peppermint. In exchange, he took a fun-sized Snickers and, without a word, walked away. I felt a little unnerved. There was something off about him, his silence, the authentic, almost too genuine look of his costume. I couldn't put my finger on it. The party started winding down, and by 11 p.m. I began packing up my station. Just as I was about to head inside, I found a small, crudely wrapped candy on my porch, looking like it had been hand-wrapped in ancient parchment. I had a sinking feeling that I knew exactly who left it. My instincts screamed at me not to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Unwrapping it revealed a small, worn-out note that read, "Thanks for the trade. See you soon." Chills ran down my spine. I hastily locked my doors and tried to calm my racing heart. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by the distant, muffled sound of jingling bells, the same bells I heard earlier that evening. I peeked out of my window and saw the jester, standing motionless in the middle of the street, staring directly at my house. Panic surged through me. He stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably mere minutes, then turned and walked away, his figure slowly getting engulfed by the thick fog that had settled. The next day, I spoke to my neighbors about the boy, but no one seemed to know who he was. The local teens also had no clue. It was as if he had appeared and disappeared solely for me. Halloween has never been the same for me since. I still participate in the festivities, but my candy swap station is a thing of the past. I always double-check my locks, and every jingle I hear sends my heart racing. To the jester who decided to trade more than just candy that night, let's never meet again. Edit. I've had a lot of people PMing me asking if I still have the note. I do. I kept it, not sure why. Maybe as a reminder to always trust my gut. Thanks for all the support. Well, that's it for tonight's spine-tingling tales. If those stories sent a shiver down your spine, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Now I have a question for all of you. What themes or topics are you itching for in future scary stories? And here's a thought. Would any of you be interested in sharing your own chilling tales for a chance to have them featured on Stories by Banick? Drop your thoughts and interest in the comments. Remember to subscribe to Stories by Banick for more haunting tales every Halloween and throughout the year. As always, the scariest stories might be the ones you've yet to hear. Sleep tight, and until our next dark rendezvous, keep the lights on.